The room was frozen. The air felt heavier than before, thick with the weight of what had just been said. The host, who had started this exchange with so much control, now found himself in unfamiliar territory. His confidence had wavered, his smirk had faded. He blinked, searching for a quick response, a clever comeback, anything to regain control of the conversation. But nothing came. The moment belonged to Salah now. The audience, once shifting uncomfortably in their seats, was now leaning forward, eyes locked onto the football star. Even those who had been distracted at the start of the interview were now glued to the unfolding drama. This wasn't just another television segment anymore, it was something bigger. The tension had reached a point where it felt like anything could happen. And then, just when it seemed like the host had no way out, he did something unexpected. He laughed. But it wasn't the same laugh from earlier. It wasn't confident, it wasn't amused. It was forced, almost uneasy. He straightened in his chair, adjusting his suit as if to regain his composure. Then, in an attempt to flip the moment back in his favor, he leaned in and spoke, his voice laced with something different this time. A challenge. If Salah had handled the last moment so gracefully, could he do it again? Could he keep his composure if the pressure was turned up even higher? The audience wasn't sure where this was going, but they could feel it. The host wasn't done. He had realized that if he let the interview end here, he would leave as the one who had been outplayed on his own show. So he tried again, but this time his words were sharper, more calculated. He tried to shift the focus, bringing up something personal, something controversial. The kind of question designed to put someone on the spot. It was no longer just about an offhanded remark. It had become a deliberate attempt to rattle Salah, to push him into a reaction that would make headlines for all the wrong reasons. The audience tensed. Even those watching from home could feel that something was different now. This wasn't just an awkward exchange anymore. It was something more intense. People were already pulling out their phones, recording the moment, knowing it would explode on social media within minutes. But Salah? He didn't seem fazed at all. He took a deep breath, his expression still calm. He had seen this before, this exact tactic, this exact moment, and he knew exactly how to handle it. What happened next would leave the entire world talking. But no one, not the host, not the audience, not even Salah himself, was ready for the second twist that was about to unfold. For a few agonizing seconds, the tension in the studio was unbearable. The audience barely blinked, the cameras zoomed in, and the host, still forcing a half smile, waited for Salah to stumble. But instead of flinching or lashing out, Salah did something no one expected. He smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a forced one, but a genuine calm expression that completely disarmed the moment. Then, with a measured tone, he spoke, but instead of directly addressing the host's sharp words, he turned the conversation in a completely different direction. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he used the moment to talk about something meaningful, something bigger than the exchange that had just taken place. He shifted the entire atmosphere, taking control in a way so effortless, so powerful, that it left everyone in the room stunned. The audience, which had been caught between discomfort and anticipation, now found themselves nodding in agreement. Even those who had expected a heated debate were left speechless by the way Salah turned what could have been a controversial moment into an inspiring one. And the host, he suddenly realized that he had lost, not because he had been embarrassed or exposed, but because Salah had refused to play the game. The host had set a trap, expecting a reaction, but instead he had been given wisdom, humility, and grace in return. But just when it seemed like everything had settled, the real twist happened. A crew member, someone working behind the scenes, stepped forward and whispered something into the host's ear. His face changed instantly. Whatever he had just been told had completely thrown him off. He stiffened, cleared his throat, and for the first time since the interview began, he seemed unsure of what to say next. The air in the studio was thick with anticipation. Everyone, audience members, the production crew, even the host himself, was waiting for Salah's reaction. The moment felt stretched, as if time had slowed down. The host, who had started this exchange with so much confidence, was still leaning in, expecting either an embarrassed laugh or an awkward attempt to dodge the remark. But what he didn't expect was the way Salah would take control of the situation without raising his voice, without even changing the relaxed expression on his face. Salah finally spoke. His words weren't sharp, but they carried weight. They weren't loud, but they were powerful. The moment they left his mouth, the entire mood in the room shifted. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Calm, steady, and full of the kind of wisdom that only comes from someone who has been through real struggles. His response wasn't defensive. He didn't try to argue. Instead, he turned the host's words into something completely unexpected. A lesson. A moment of reflection. The audience, who had been sitting on edge, started to react. Some nodded, others whispered to the person next to them. Even those who weren't necessarily Salah's biggest fans could see it. This was different. He had taken an insult, a moment meant to humiliate him, and turned it into something much bigger. But the host wasn't ready to back down just yet. Maybe it was his pride, maybe it was the pressure of live television, or maybe he just didn't know how to handle the fact that Salah had completely shifted the power dynamic in the room. So he tried again. This time, his words came quicker, his tone just a bit sharper. It was clear now, he wasn't just making a joke. He was pushing, testing Salah's patience. The studio lights felt hotter, the cameras closer. The tension was back, but this time, the audience wasn't just watching Salah. They were watching the host too. How far was he willing to take this? What made this moment even more interesting was the people watching from home. Social media was already buzzing. Clips of the interview were being shared in real time. Fans from all over the world were reacting, some outraged, some impressed, others just waiting to see how it would all unfold. But no one, not the viewers, not the audience, not even the host, was prepared for what would happen next. Because Salah, still perfectly composed, was about to say something that no one would ever forget. The studio felt different now. The playful atmosphere that had filled the room at the start of the interview was completely gone. What had begun as a routine conversation had turned into something else, something tense, unpredictable. The host had pushed, expecting to rattle Salah, expecting to control the moment. But now, for the first time, it seemed like he was the one losing control. The audience could feel it too. The energy had shifted, and all eyes were locked on Salah, waiting for his next words. But Salah didn't rush. He let the silence sit there for a second longer, making everyone feel the weight of it. The host, perhaps sensing that the situation was slipping from his hands, forced a laugh. It sounded different this time, not confident, not amused, but nervous. Maybe he had underestimated the man sitting across from him. Maybe he had expected a different reaction. But now, for the first time, it seemed like he wasn't sure how this would end. Salah finally leaned in slightly, his expression unreadable. His voice, when he spoke again, was just as calm as before, but this time there was something else behind it. A quiet intensity. A reminder that this wasn't just a footballer sitting in front of the cameras. This was someone who had built his life overcoming obstacles, someone who had dealt with pressure far greater than a few pointed words from a talk show host. The audience was no longer just watching, they were invested. The studio was completely silent, everyone holding their breath, waiting for what Salah would say next. Even those who had started the interview indifferent were now fully hooked. It wasn't just about football anymore. It wasn't just about the host's words. It was about something bigger. A test of character, of patience, of dignity. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, Salah spoke again. And what he said this time was so unexpected, so perfectly timed, that it sent a ripple through the entire studio. Even the host, who had spent the last few minutes trying to control the conversation, trying to steer the moment in his favor, suddenly found himself speechless. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of the moment, as the audience sat frozen, stunned by what they had just witnessed. But this wasn't the end. The real impact of Salah's words was about to unfold in a way no one saw coming. Because what happened next would turn this interview into one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. The world of live television is unpredictable. Anything can happen in front of millions of viewers. Sometimes, moments of humor and fun turn into something entirely different. That's exactly what happened when a well-known TV host tried to put Mohamed Salah on the spot, embarrassing him in a way no one saw coming. But what happened next left the entire audience, and even the host, completely stunned. It started as a typical interview. The cameras rolled, the crowd cheered, and Salah, as always, walked in with his signature humble smile. He had been invited to talk about his career, his incredible journey from the streets of Nagreg, Egypt, to becoming one of the best footballers in the world. Fans were excited to hear from their hero, expecting another inspiring conversation. But what they didn't expect was the sharp turn the interview would take. The host, known for his bold and sometimes controversial style, decided to challenge Salah in a way that caught everyone off guard. Maybe it was for ratings, maybe it was for entertainment, or maybe he just underestimated the man sitting across from him. With a smirk, he threw a question, or rather, a remark, that felt more like an insult than an honest inquiry. It was meant to make Salah uncomfortable, to push him into a corner where he would fumble for words or react emotionally. A moment designed for headlines, something that would go viral for all the wrong reasons. The audience gasped. Some shifted in their seats, sensing the tension in the air. Was this really happening? Would Salah lose his cool on live television? Would he fire back, defend himself, or walk off the stage? The host leaned in, waiting, perhaps expecting the usual nervous laugh or awkward silence. But Salah did something no one expected. His response wasn't just calm, it was brilliant. It wasn't defensive, it was powerful. In just a few words, he turned the entire situation around, leaving everyone in the studio speechless. Even the host, who had started this moment with all the confidence in the world, was left with nothing to say. What exactly did Salah say? How did he manage to turn a moment of public humiliation into one of his most unforgettable TV appearances? Stay with us as we break down this incredible exchange and why it became one of the most talked about moments in sports television history. For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that feels louder than noise. The audience held their breath, eyes locked on Mohamed Salah, waiting to see how he would react. The host, still leaning forward with that smug grin, seemed to believe he had won this little battle. Maybe he thought Salah would laugh it off, struggle to find an answer, or brush it under the rug. But Salah wasn't like most guests. He didn't flinch, he didn't shift uncomfortably, and he certainly didn't look defeated. Instead, he just sat there, calm as ever, with a look in his eyes that hinted at something unexpected. To understand why this moment was so powerful, you have to understand who Salah is, not just as a footballer, but as a person. He's someone who has faced challenges most people could never imagine. He grew up in a small village in Egypt, chasing his dreams with nothing but sheer determination and an unshakable belief in himself. He traveled hours every day just to train, sacrificing his childhood for a future he wasn't even sure would come. And yet, here he was, a global icon, a hero to millions, sitting under the bright lights of a TV studio, facing a challenge far different from the ones on the football pitch. The host, still enjoying his moment, decided to push further. Maybe he thought Salah's silence was hesitation. Maybe he mistook his calmness for weakness. Whatever the reason, he repeated his words, this time with even more emphasis, as if daring Salah to react. The crowd murmured, sensing the growing tension. Some were visibly uncomfortable, others were intrigued. After all, this was live television, anything could happen. But what the host didn't realize was that he had just set the stage for one of the most unforgettable moments of Salah's career. Because Salah wasn't about to engage in an argument. He wasn't about to raise his voice or lose his cool. No, his response would be something entirely different. Something that would flip the entire situation on its head and leave the host completely speechless. As Salah finally leaned forward, ready to respond, the entire room seemed to pause. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of his face. And then, with just a few words, he changed everything. But what exactly did he say? And why did his response leave even the host struggling to find words? Stay with us, because what happens next will completely surprise you. Then, in a shocking turn of events, the host did something no one had seen coming. He shifted in his seat, looked Salah in the eye, and for the first time that evening, his tone changed. It wasn't playful, it wasn't challenging, it was genuine. He acknowledged what had just happened, admitted that he had pushed too far, and most surprising of all, offered something rare in television, a sincere moment of respect. The same audience that had been holding its breath now erupted into applause, realizing they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Salah, as always, remained humble. He shook the host's hand, smiled, and with a quiet nod, ended the conversation on his own terms. And just like that, what had started as an attempt to humiliate him had turned into a lesson in grace, dignity, and the true power of self-control. But what the world didn't know was that this moment, now going viral across social media, would become one of the most talked about interviews in recent history. As the interview came to a close, the energy in the room had completely shifted. What had started as a tense, uncomfortable exchange had transformed into something far more meaningful. The audience, who had been expecting controversy, had instead witnessed a masterclass in composure and humility. Salah had not only handled the situation with dignity, but he had also left an impact far greater than anyone could have predicted. The host, still visibly shaken by the unexpected turn of events, managed a smile. He knew that this interview would be talked about for a long time. But more than that, he seemed to realize something deeper. This wasn't just about ratings or viral moments. It was about the way people carry themselves when faced with pressure. It was about respect, about understanding that words have power, and that true strength isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's found in the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly who he is. As Salah stood up to leave, the audience gave him a standing ovation. It wasn't just for his football skills or his success. It was for the way he had handled the moment, for the lesson he had given everyone watching. Even those who had doubted him or expected a different reaction couldn't help but admire him now. This was why Salah was more than just a footballer. He was a role model, an example of how to rise above negativity without losing yourself in the process. Backstage, the clip of the interview was already trending. Fans, analysts, and even fellow athletes were sharing their thoughts. Some praised Salah's grace under pressure, others called it one of the best moments of live television in recent memory. But no matter how people interpreted it, one thing was clear: this wasn't just another interview. It was a moment that would be remembered. As Salah walked out of the studio, he didn't look back. He had no reason to. He had said everything he needed to say, not through anger or argument, but through calmness and wisdom. And as the world continued to talk about what had just happened, he did what he always did, focused on his game, his family, and the things that truly mattered. Because at the end of the day, that's what made him who he was: a champion, both on and off the field.